In this question, you're given an actual size cassette. There's a picture of it in your textbook. This is related to the unit project, which you may or may not be doing. Some of you may be familiar with cassette tapes. I certainly am. I've seen the whole progression from 8 tracks and cassettes and records, LPs to MP3s, CDs and so on. Anyway, there's progression, often smaller, and now most of our music is digital. We don't even consider it as taking up space. Anyway, you may or may not be having to answer this question, and it is a little bit obscure because we're just measuring and there could be some room for error. I know many students find that frustrating. Use a suitable referent. So I used my pinky, and my pinky is approximately 10 centimeters. 10 millimeters, 1 centimeter, I should say. 1 centimeter is equal to 10 millimeters. So I just marked my pinky off and I did it really quickly. I was not making any attempt to be accurate. And I got 90 in this direction. I got 10 in this direction, millimeters, and 50 in this direction. And this could have been 5, 1, and 9. And in the book, they got an estimate of 10, 1.5, and 5. So this one was close. This one's out a little bit and this one's out a little bit. As long as it's reasonable, we want to be in the right ballpark. So if you would have had 900 or 0.9 or something like that, that would be quite ridiculous. And so the actual measurement here, you could then use your ruler and come up with what that would be equal to. For this next question, they're asking you to calculate some perimeters. It's just practice with using a ruler. So you might get a slightly different answer than what the textbook is giving, but you would measure with your ruler around the outsides and find the perimeters of the faces. So if you were actually holding a cassette tape box in your hand, it's a rectangular box. It's a rectangular prism. It's no different than any other box. It's just very skinny. It's long and skinny, not very high. And it says, how many perimeters do you need to calculate? Well, only 3. There are 6 faces. So if you could picture a box, look at a cereal box or any kind of shoe box or something, any kind of rectangular box that you might have in your house, and you think, this is a terrible diagram here, but we've got a top and we've got a bottom that's invisible. We've got a front, we've got a back which is invisible, we've got a right side here and a left side which is invisible, and because it's a rectangular 90-degree angles, it's actually a box. We know intuitively that these faces are all equal to each other, so the perimeter around the top will be the same as the perimeter of the bottom. The perimeter of the right side will be the same as the perimeter of the left side. Perimeter of the front the same as the perimeter of the back. And these are the answers that the textbook would have given. So for example, the top would have been to measure this length and this length and this length and this length. And if you're really interested in checking, you could speak to your teacher, or we could enhance this video by actually doing those measurements with the ruler. But I suspect most of you will be able to get very close to these numbers just by using a reasonably accurate metric system ruler. The last question, they give you some history, some information about different sizes of vinyl records. 45s, 78s, and 33 1/3, or the LP size. I certainly use those 45s and 33 1/3. I don't recall having too many 78s. So I'm not thinking that the question is or the textbook is expecting you to be super accurate here, because the picture is not even really taken straight down. It's on an angle, and that's going to skew some of the measurements somewhat. Anyway, it's just giving you practice with setting up ratios and actually doing some measurements with the ruler. There's no way that you can kind of get around that. The only way to practice working with a ruler is to actually use a ruler. So I'm sitting here with my textbook open. I've got a ruler sitting on top of it. That's how you're going to have to tackle this. So they're saying that a 45 record has an actual diameter of 17.5. So that would be measuring from one side of a circle to the other side of the circle, and it has to be through the center. A diameter of a circle is by definition, it's a chord. A chord is any line that goes from one point on a circle to another point on the circle, and a diameter happens to be a special case of a chord. It's the longest one where it goes through the center. So what you're going to want to do is measure with your ruler and try to get as accurately as you can the longest distance that you can from one point on a circle through another point of the circle through the center. And sorry, we're supposed to estimate the diameter of the LP. So I notice that the 45 is touching at the same place as the LP. And so the 45 is going further than halfway. It's covering up the halfway point of the LP, which I'm sort of picturing as being maybe approximately right there. So it's just a little bit less than half. So if we were going to estimate, double this, 17.5 times 2 would be 35. And so we might say, well, it's going to be less than that. Maybe we'd say it would be 30 centimeters. I'm not sure, as opposed to 35 centimeters. So that would be my estimate just based on the diagram here, because it's less than half of what the 45 is. So I didn't obsess about this to try to get super accurate results. I measured the actual 45 using a ruler and I got 27 millimeters. You might get an answer that's slightly different, but it should be reasonably close to that. So this is what it is by measuring, and this is what we are told it is in real life, 17.5 centimeters. So it's a ratio of size by measurement and size in real life. And then I measured with the LP, same thing, trying to get the longest possible distance going through the center, so the diameter of the LP. And once again, I did not obsess, I just did it reasonably quickly, but I tried to be somewhat accurate. I got 47 millimeters, and notice I'm comparing millimeters with millimeters, and then I want to know what will that be, and since I've got millimeters over centimeters, this would be millimeters over centimeters. So diameter of LP, real in the book, real diameter of the LP, sorry, this is the 45, and measured diameter of the LP and over the real diameter of the LP based on this ratio. So I've set up my proportion now, multiply these two numbers and divide by the number that's left over. So 17.5 times 47, and then divide that by 27, and I get 30.46, so 30.5, and that's going to be in centimeters. And the textbook is saying 293 millimeters. That's reasonably close. If I change this to millimeters, it's going to be 305 millimeters. So we're out by 12 millimeters, which isn't a huge amount, and LP is a pretty large thing, and that was just based on a quick measurement.